Hello, my dear friends. I have again a very special guest today on Saturday, the 27th of July, 2025, Mark Sleboda from Moscow. Mark, where can people find your excellent analysis and work?
Okay, well, first of all, you can find me over here at the Real Politique on Boosty. Boosty is like Patreon, but it is sanctions proof, which is important to me because living in Russia, I'm under sanctions. So I can't use Patreon and Substack and YouTube and those other things that allow people to support my work and analysis. So it's just Boosty, but Boosty is very good. And I have a lot of exclusive content there, interactions. I'm sure that Mark can tell you that. But you
Very
could
fun.
also find me at The Real Politic with Mark Sleboda on Substack and Telegram, and at Mark Sleboda on at Mark Sleboda 1 on the evil American oligarch Elon Musk's Twitter X. Those places.
I will share all the informations later in the comments down below and the video description. And today I want to start with a special thing for Germany. And we
Yes.
heard very much hard speaking the last, let's say, weeks since Mr. Merz is our new chancellor. And he has a rhetoric what is known in Germany not for the last 80 years. And we also heard something about attacking Kaliningrad from General Donahue the last weeks. And I want to know first, is there anything Russia can do against Germany under UN law or the UN Charter? Because in former times, Germany was one of the so-called Feindstaaten when the UN was founded. Nowadays, it's said, or the meaning in Germany is this so-called Feinstaatenklausel is ridiculous and not still functions. On the other hand side, we have many people in the alternative media which say Russia has some opportunities, for example, to cancel the 4 plus 2 contracts from the 90s when both German states were reunited. And there could be much problem done on the diplomatic area, not on the military. This will, I think, come later. What is what your meaning on your minds on this um, things?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting technicality remnant, right, of the foundation of the UN and the UN Security Council, but I don't think that it is really actionable in the modern day, either for diplomatic means or for certainly not for any type of military action. It's a remnant, and yes, Germany and Japan are still technically classified as such, and yes, Germany and Japan are still actually occupied by American troops
Yes.
all these years later. But you would have us believe that the German and the Japanese government, of course, acquiesce and are even in favor of the continuing American occupation of their respective countries. So while it's an interesting legal and historical footnote, I can't see that Russia would be able to make any use of it in the modern day and in the modern circumstances, with the US and France and the United Kingdom also on the Security Council, and the rest of the world recognizes Germany and Japan as, fully full, sovereign states, and it is unlikely that historical, if technical appeal would have any effect. I think what is most interesting about this is the attitude of the Russian president of Vladimir Putin towards Germany. Putin is a bit of a Germanophile. I mean, he really likes Germany.
Yeah.
He speaks fluent German. Obviously, he was there in East Germany, in Berlin and elsewhere, in the beginning of his career in the KGB, and rather than any bitterness as the the Warsaw Pact and then the Soviet Union fell apart. Putin himself has, at best, you can say mixed feelings about the Soviet Union. I would say that largely while geopolitically regrets its collapse, he was no big fan of communism or of the existing Soviet government. So, what he took away from his time in Germany is a deep rooted feeling, a deep sympathy, maybe even a love of Germany, and a trust that of Germany that resulted from that has led him to make several catastrophic mistakes in starting at the very least in 2013 2014 with the events of the Maidan Putsch, the January 21st agreement, and then with the ill-fated Minsk agreements, and his belief that Germany was rational and that they could reach an understanding, and they could have a better relationship with Germany than they could, for instance, say with the United Kingdom or with the United States, has been abused by Germany, and it has nearly proven disastrous for Russia, I would say. And because as far as I'm concerned, the all the events from 2014, from the Maidan Putsch onward, did not have to happen. And Putin himself has regretted, has admitted as much, that he made mistakes, and one of those was, quite honestly, trusting the former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. And he has openly admitted that is perhaps the greatest mistake that he has made during his presidency. And it had enormous consequences, not only for Russia and Ukraine, but for, a wider geopolitics. And those mistakes, that abused trust, has led us up to the current state of what is still bordering on a hot Russia-NATO conflict. I mean, it's hanging right on the precipice above that abyss,
Yeah.
and it has taken Putin a long time to I think um, give up that feeling that he had, that Germanophilia. You could call it even a Europeanophile, but I think for Putin it was specifically for Germany. And it's going to make, right now, with the rhetoric. I mean, there's just a sea change in the rhetoric from what we saw, even with Olaf Scholz, I think Putin basically regarded Olaf Scholz with contempt. And I think most of the world regarded Olaf Scholz, even other European members, did not have much respect for the man as a leader. I don't think his own coalition partners
No, really.
had respect for him as a leader. I mean, it seemed for me pretty obvious that the one wearing the pants in that coalition was Annalena Baerbock, not
Uh,
Olaf Scholz.
yeah. Because You said we are still occupied country. I will say we have many American military friends sitting, especially here in Bavaria. We have still some British soldiers not really stationed because their army is so small. They only have now a common battalion with the Bundeswehr in, I think it's a bridge laying battalion left on German soil. But when you said the history and the special relation to Angela Merkel, perhaps there's one thing about Angela Merkel, I don't know if you know it. She was, let's say, there are rumors that she was a special agent in the former GDR for the so-called Stasi and an IM, an unofficial um, client or inoffizieller Mitarbeiter. There are many rumors. And I just got the thought because Gerhard Schröder, who was a very special friend of Putin, he was the chancellor between 1998 and 2005, and then he was kicked out about some, let's say, minor political thing. And I think especially because he said no to the American invasion of Iraq. And I think even to this time, German troops should go with in war. I was in this time I was in an sergeant school in the Bundeswehr, and we had a general coming to us and telling us we will go to Turkey. This was 2002, and we will be participants. We will take part as of the coalition. And Schröder said no. And after this, he was 1.5 years later, he was out, and then he was um, Angela Merkel was coming in. And one more thing, we had the war 2008 in Georgia, and we know every war takes a long time to be prepared. This was Georgia, which failed. Then we have the Ukraine, and perhaps the Germans were used as a battering ram. Could you find something on this story I told now? Perhaps there is something in the mist.
Yeah, so I did not know that Angela Merkel is suspected of having an intelligence background,
Yeah.
which is rather interesting because I would say that Putin is a very cunning and skillful operator in psychological terms when it comes to relations with foreign leaders. I'm sure that he gets a psychological profile of, everyone that he's going to talk to. I'm sure that he actually reads it, unlike maybe many other presidents the world over, certainly, unlike Donald Trump, and pays special attention to, hallmarks. If at the end of the day it was Angela Merkel who manipulated Putin rather than the other way around, that would be a fascinating turnabout, um, uh, and one that I doubt that many other leaders would be able to do to Putin. And I think that Angela Merkel in particular would have only been able to do that because of Putin's weakness, his Germanophilia, his love for Germany from his time there and his personal feelings towards it. Um, with regards to the potential for military conflict between Russia and Germany, I still think it is unlikely unless it is Germany that initiates it. Um, Russia has reserved the right to strike back at any country that supplies long range strike capability, meaning primarily missiles, to the Kiev regime in Ukraine. That is, requires certainly that requires active assistance, as the Storm Shadows, the Scalps, the ATACMS, these other missile systems do. It was admitted by no less a person than the former German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. that
Yeah.
that is so. That these missile systems required military specialists when he was explaining why he would not send the Taurus. Now, Merz has made it clear that he wants to send the Taurus. And from the statements from the German foreign minister recently and others, it seems clear that they are going to transfer the Taurus to the Kiev regime, that they're going to then attach a made in Ukraine stamp to it. And say that it's a Ukrainian missile. The Russians, of course, will not be fooled by this. They will immediately call it out for what it is. Um, does that mean that they will strike back against Germany? I don't think so. Uh, they haven't done so thus far against the British or the French or the Americans. And ultimately, while Germany presents a more tempting target, being closer and thus easier to hit, um, at the end of the day, the Taurus is not going to change what is happening on the battlefield in Russia. We already know that it can only be supplied in numbers, somewhere between 100 and 150 missiles, because that is what Germany has in its inventory, and it is not able to ramp up production, significantly of those. Uh, Russia very quickly learned to counteract through a combination of electronic warfare and air defense, the Storm Shadow, the Scalp, the ATACMS. And I am sure that while the Taurus is, I believe, a slightly more advanced missile than say the Storm Shadows, and with a slightly better range, that ultimately Russia's very quickly nullify that advantage. I don't know if you're a fan of Star Trek.
Yes, yes.
I'm a sci-fi fan myself. Okay, so Russian electronic warfare and air defense is like the Borg, right?
Yeah.
You fire a phaser at the Borg, and you get maybe 3 shots, and then their shields have adjusted, and that's it. Game over. That is what the Taurus will be. And considering the low numbers of those, the and the likelihood that they will do, not insignificant, but limited damage because of Russia's own defenses that will adapt. Russia, at the end of the day, do we want to potentially start a hot conflict with NATO, with the ever existent risk of a slippery slope down to nuclear conflict, when such strikes wouldn't change the outcome of the conflict in Ukraine anyway, that Russia is winning? Russia has been very, the Kremlin has been very keen to stay inside the box, right, of an attrition war in Ukraine, where it is winning, where it is winning on the battlefield, where it is winning in the war of industrial production and strategic conflict with NATO, right? It has not yet allowed itself to be provoked outside of that box where it is winning, despite all the attempts to do so. And I think it unlikely that German long range missiles supplied in 100, 150 to the Kiev regime are going to make Russia respond militarily to Germany.
Okay. And
That said, I don't see that relations between Russia and Germany are going to improve anytime soon. They seem to just continually go further downhill with each successive German leader, from Merkel, then worsening with Olaf Scholz, and now to the point where Merz actually, I mean, you can tell me, Merz seems like he wants war with Russia, like he really wants it.
I would say he has, let's say he has got somebody who tells him that he should do it. Um, Normally, I would say I think he's a very intelligent man because he has made the juristic studies. He is a judge in his former life before he went to policy. He was in the military. He was an officer, or for 2 years he was going to be an officer, and so he knows what to do. And he is with BlackRock, and I think here is the real masters of him, pressuring him to do the things for the money laundering they are doing in the European Union. And I heard something, rumors that one of his sons said he's a very dangerous man. Perhaps he's not the best leader in being, let's say, a chancellor for the people, but he is. I think he's very intelligent and he's very cold-blooded to do his job what is told to him. I think it's not from his own thinking and his own minds, because he's in the, let's say, in the age where he knew what was the outcoming of the Second World War from the parents and everything else. He saw the old damaged cities and something like this. So I can't believe he is looking for a war if there is nobody who will tell him to do it. This is my opinion on him, because I'm not very sure if he is a real warmonger or he is doing it on purpose for somebody else, knowing the Russians won't attack Germany if he goes with the Taurus or something like this. And one thing for the Taurus is not only a German weapon, it's also a Swedish rocket missile. And I'm not sure, perhaps although the Swedes gave some of their rockets to the Ukraine. They don't have to be repainted because it's black, no, blue and yellow, perhaps. I don't know. But this is very, very slippery slope, I think, with these rockets.
Yeah, my understanding is that because the Taurus missiles still uses proprietary American components, that uh, Germany perhaps needs permission from the United States to transfer this weapon to the Kiev regime, which is interesting because Trump has himself not specifically not. Whatever else he has done and he has not done, and I don't have much respect for the man. I have a great deal of contempt and exasperation for him. But he stopped the US firing ballistic missiles into mainland Russia. And that alone, you know, has averted, a slide to a direct U.S. Russia conflict to a degree. Uh, if Merz wanted to jump back in that, would he need Trump's permission, and would he then get it? It's a different thing, of course, for Germany to say to the Europeans, "Oh well, if you want to do it, go ahead." He seems. I mean, that is obviously the path that the U.S. Secretary of Defense Hegseth and others have laid out. Right, that is the new recognition by the U.S. government of Donald Trump that hegemony is expensive. It is hard, and that the U.S. on its own cannot militarily confront all of its potential challengers, meaning China, Russia, and Iran, on its own today. And therefore, it has made the prioritization decision for a division of labor. And it would like Europe to pick up the majority of the burden of dealing with Russia, whether that is militarily or diplomatically. It would like Israel to deal with Iran. And then the idea that every US president has had since Obama is that they would then pivot to the real threat, which I believe is already far beyond their ability
Yeah.
to counter it, China. Now, the problem there, of course, is that Europe, led by Germany, more or less, uh, is not capable of defeating or even managing Russia in the current deterioration of European militaries. And Merz may talk a lot of smack. He has very aggressive rhetoric. But the German military, by German military's own reports and assessments, has deteriorated to such a point where not only do I not believe that it presents a significant conventional threat to Russia, I don't know if it's capable of defending Germany.
Um,
And the British and the French militaries are in more or less the same situation. That is why I
yeah,
think Russia does not fear Europe. It still has a healthy respect for the American
yeah.
military, but it does not fear. It doesn't seek conflict with it. That's another thing
Uh,
entirely, but it does not fear them anymore.
I think the German military is not in a state to defend their own country in its whole. Um, in the big cities, we have got getting rumors that there are big shootings between, let's say, criminal gangs in Berlin, in the Ruhrpott, and so on. And I think Germany's or the own countries are not really in charge of their own of the Federal Republic of Germany. And there's you told it a lot of smack. What I know from the military, I had a soldier 2 months ago in an or I talked with a soldier from the tank corps, and he said all the fighting soldiers would never go to the Russian border and fight with Russia. They would defend the German borders. This is correct, and they would do it very bravely and with everything they could. But they never would go to, let's say, do it on American purpose and give their blood for somebody else. This is what he told me, and this was an sergeant. I think he was 15 years in the military. I think he knows many of his comrades in the same age. And he also told me that there are many generals and colonels in the military who are silent, but they won't go to the front. I don't know what they will do with the 5,000 men in Lithuania, but this is what he told me. Um, this is the one thing. The other thing is, I think the political class is so away from the people and the things on the ground. They are just in the, let's say, in the backyard of the American neocons. And I don't know if you ever heard from the so-called Chancellor files. This means every German chancellor has to sign a document in Washington that he will obey to the rulers, the real rulers in Germany. And this is, like you said, the US administrations or the deep state. I think we can tell this, and everybody in Germany who is aware of this knows this. Yeah. And so I think there's many things going on in the, let's say, in the back rooms, and I'm not really sure what is going on with this so-called elites today.
Yeah.
But I think they won't really go against Russia. Perhaps there are some, let's say, um, people in the politics which have relations to grandfathers who were in 80 years before, they were in the military, they were with the Wehrmacht or the SS or what else, or the party of Mr. Adolf Hitler. And this could be, but I think there are some elites which are underground and don't want to have a war. I hope so.
I, if so, they haven't been speaking very loudly.
No, they are not very
Uh,
loud because they are put down because we have very strict laws on these things the last years after the pandemic, what you can say and what you can't say. Yeah.
yeah. It's interesting because if there is there is a potential for a direct hot conflict between, you know, Russia and Germany or Russia and NATO, but it won't be because Russia attacks NATO, and it most likely won't be because NATO directly attacks Russia. The situation will come if NATO puts troops in Ukraine or potentially in the future in Belarus or Moldova.
Okay.
That is where the potential. So that is the, the gray zone, right? The neutral zone, that the previous NATO Secretary Jens Stoltenberg made very clear that there should be no more gray zones, that NATO should go right up to Russia. Obviously, Russia doesn't agree and is willing to fight to prevent it from being so. That is where the potential flashpoint is. Now, let's say that in the next few months, the Kiev regime's military starts a quicker collapse along the front lines, and sometime next year, in 2026, Russia sends forces across the Dnieper uh, into Kiev. Then you will hear a renewed, increasingly shrill pressure across the political elites in the West, across the media, which is a driver of this conflict, that the U.S., that European countries need to send troops to Ukraine, and even they will consider doing so, not even from a belief at this point that they can challenge Russia militarily, but simply as human tripwires, a belief that if they put them there, that Russia won't attack them. And there they are wrong. Because while I do not believe that Russia would launch missiles at Germany in any, you know, from any potential escalation, while there's even the fig leaf of a proxy of the Kiev regime in between them. But German troops or Polish troops or French troops or British troops or American troops in Ukraine, that is another story. Those are fair game. And very quietly, not being admitted to, I am quite sure that Russia has killed a very significant number of serving military and intelligence personnel from across NATO states in Ukraine over the last 3 years. But that is where the danger. So it really becomes a question, not so much will you defend Germany if Russia attacks, or will you take part in a German attack on Russia? Will you take part in a Western defense of the Kiev regime in Ukraine, right? Or a Sandu regime in Moldova, or a chance to overthrow the dictatorship of Lukashenko in Belarus. That is where the conflict will come from. But that can very quickly become a direct and open then conflict. And the voices that we've heard from NATO generals in the last week, giddy about their plans to seize Kaliningrad. Um, well, first of all, I have to say that I don't think their plans would actually be all that successful. But I mean, it's almost moot. I mean, if NATO moved on Kaliningrad at that point, tactical nuclear weapons would be fired. I mean, that that is, I do not have a doubt that that would be the situation if there was an actual threat that Kaliningrad would be overrun, and then
Yeah.
it all becomes moot.
I think because Kaliningrad, which is former Königsberg until 1945,
Yes.
um, but one more thing, I got also let's say an idea when Mr. General Donahue told that he would overrun Kaliningrad in lightning speed.
Yes.
Whatever he means with this, I don't think so. But it
No.
would have go from Polish soil. This is the one thing. I don't know if the Poles are very kind of this. And the other thing we had, it's nearly 86 years ago, on the 31st of August 1939, there was a false flag action from German troops to the so-called radio station in Gleiwitz. This was, let's say, the thing when the German Wehrmacht started to attack Poland on the 1st of September. There was also something inside Poland to the German population there, or the German speaking population in Poland. But this was the false flag action. Could something like this also take happen in the mind of some of these generals and colonels? Because we have also our English friends which are very keen on doing such actions.
Yeah, the British are pretty hot for that. They still believe that they are an empire, and they seem to have really internalized their, shall we say, James Bond fantasies, or too many books they've read about British covert operations during World War II that are more mythologized than they are necessarily real or effective. Um, Certainly, the British have been behind a lot of the strategizing of the failed attacks, particularly in the South, in the Black Sea region by the Kiev regime. They have been their Admiral Radikin has been quite open that he was directing this failed Krinky operation and attacks on the Crimean Bridge that at least up to this date have not been successful. So I I have a greater belief that if any of the Western states was to do something stupid and provocative and, shall we say, adventurous, that has the potential to start a hot war, at least under the current US government, it is probably the British. They're the ones most likely to do it. So we can't entirely rule it out. Um, Obviously, there, though, the British ego would be making, writing checks that their military strength cannot cash. There's no really no question there. And I mean, the headlines are out in the British press today. As a country, Britain is facing, they're broke.
Yeah.
They're facing financial bankruptcy at this point. When you have, the British ministers, British corporations admitting that energy costs have risen so high in the last few years without ever admitting why, um, that energy costs for a company in the UK are now four times what they would be, say, in the United States. That is, it's a death knell. And I'm afraid that the current German foreign policy is literally committing suicide of the German economy.
Yes.
That they are perfectly willing and even eager to do this out of some ideological belief in, shall we, if you want to call it Western exceptionalism, or a belief in their role in US led Western global hegemony, which, they dovetail together. But, and I do not see in Germany where there is a political force that has a chance of taking power that would reverse it.
Yes.
You?
No,
I mean,
not really.
The AFD, I mean, yes, they've gained support, but they're never going to break 50% on their own. And I don't see any other political party in Germany that would ever ally with them to do so.
Even if they would break 50%, there would be a court ruling them out.
Yes.
Or the EU, Mrs. von der Leyen will come and speak this is not happening, and we have to vote until somebody else takes again 50%. So this is my view, and I'm not really sure if the AfD is not also a Trojan horse, also set on for exactly this thing to put the, let's say, the non-believers into a pot to get them under control. This is the one thing. But you mentioned something. The first thing, do you think really Donald Trump is in charge, or somebody else really has the charge
Okay.
in these things? What to do and what not to do at this
Okay,
point?
so I mean, yeah, any U.S. president's powers are limited,
Yeah,
right? And I don't believe that those powers are limited by some transnational cabal or conspiracy that really runs things. And certainly, I mean, there's no question that there are big campaign donors like Adelson's
yeah,
widow that have strong influence with him, right? But where the US president, I believe, is controlled is by underneath, right? By the figures within his own administration, but even more so in, what Ben Rhodes called the blob,
yeah,
right? You might also call it the deep state, the permanent bureaucracy. That is where the real ideological foundation and impetus of the drive for US hegemony and primacy lies. It is within that great amorphous, and it must be said, not uniform, right? There are factions within the deep state, right? Now, there's a general course, but then there's like prioritization. The entirety of the US deep state, they want war with Russia, China, and Iran, or, action against them, shall we say, because they see them as the potential holdouts and challengers of US led hegemony. But they prioritize which they see as the biggest threat, where the resources need to go first and foremost. And that's what we see in the Trump administration right now. Trump has, I mean, and he does have a certain power of the bully pulpit because of his charisma, his ability and willingness to speak to the world, apparently on a whim, on his social media. But then, of course, he reverses his own statements on that, with every other breath. So yeah, even there, things said can be unsaid and so forth. Um, so I mean, he does have a certain, but it's obviously fairly easy for members of his administration and the larger blob to manipulate him. John Bolton, from his first administration, was quite clear about this. Trump got it in his head that he could make a peace deal with North Korea, and John Bolton just went out of his way to say yes, 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 and then did everything he could to sink that so that nothing ever came from it. And then he bragged about how he did it, right? Everyone plays to Trump's ego and narcissism. And he expects that. He that's what he wants. He thinks of himself like an emperor,
yeah,
right? That everyone has to come to his court and pay court to him. So he understands that everyone is kissing his ass, is buttering him up, right? And if they're not, he actually gets quite offended. There's very few people that he will take that from. I think Putin is one of them because he does have a certain amount of respect. Now that doesn't mean that he would ever sacrifice his own or American interests as he understands them for Putin, but it does mean at least that he has respect for Putin, where he has no respect for any of the leaders in Europe.
yes.
Or Zelensky in Ukraine, or many other leaders around the world. So, but I mean, is he in charge? No, ultimately not, because it is the institutions of the U.S. government where the real power lies. When something happens, they bring a list of policy options to the president. Now, those are very carefully managed policy options, right? And those are the options that he has. It's literally A, B, C, D, right? And that's it. Those are your choices. That is how the president is ultimately controlled in the United States. It's nothing, shall we say, sexier than that. It's nothing, not quite, the evidence of money and puppet strings and anything like that. It's a lot more banal
Hmm.
than that. It is simply the institutions of state, of the deep state, if you will. And most countries are like that to one degree or another. And I mean, Germany, quite obviously, has a certain amount of impetus there as well. And the current German political elite, I mean, even the difference between the this administration, the previous administration, and I mean, I despised Angela Merkel, but now I look back on her chancellorship with a bit of nostalgia because at the very least she seemed sane and um I didn't agree with much of what she did, but I believe that she wouldn't have done anything dangerous and provocative on her own, at least. I'm not so sure with the last, and with this current German leadership.
Yeah.
That the German political elite, to me today, seems consumed with hatred of Russia and just absolute abasement to the United States. Like they have been. I've argued this before, seeing comments from several European leaders, EU leaders, European leaders, that they have literally been mentally colonized, this generation
Yes.
of European leaders, by American neocons to believe in Western exceptionalism, to believe that they are structurally and societally and morally superior to every other country and civilization on earth. Therefore, they have not just the right, but a duty, right? This is a messianic and supremacist. I believe that it is the single, Western exceptionalism is the single most dangerous ideology in the world today. And I believe the current German political elite, nearly across the board, at least of those that have a chance of attaining power, seem consumed by it. And I feel that is dangerous, but also tragic for Germany,
Yes.
because I think that is ill-fated, that will not ultimately succeed for them, and that the most likely outcome is that Germany will continue not just to stagnate, but actually to rot economically. And what happens, I mean, politically, economically, and then ultimately the military will, whatever Mertz's pronouncements about military spending, I don't believe them. And I don't believe it, even if they spent that money, that they could necessarily rejuvenate not only the German military industrial complex, but the German warrior ethos, which, as I understand it, looking at polling numbers, repeated polling, sociological polling, showing that most Germans, a clear majority of Germans, would choose not to fight to defend their own country.
Yes, this is correct. So
Yeah.
many of the youth we have now, let's say between 20 and 30, which is, let's say, pimped from wealth. They never would take a weapon or would go to the dirt or the military or something like this. The only, let's say, last of national interest in the mind is more the use from the former Eastern Germany. And nowadays, in the most of the, let's say, fighting units, You have got young men coming also from Russian sources or Russian roots, German Russians, for example. We have many of them German Turks, and they are in the, let's say, in the infantry, in the tank troops, and so on. And if anything would go beneath the East German border, I think many of them would turn around and say, okay, it's gone, and we have got to choose our sides. This is what also is often told when you talk to some soldiers, and they say they never would do it. We had a campaign, I think it was in the starting of the year, when in Germany we had some politicians telling the logistical companies to look for German drivers, because the drivers for the trucks, if there would start a war, nowadays all come from East Europe, let's say Hungary, Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, or even Russia. And so they say you can't depend on their loyalty. And this is known. I think this is also one big thing. Um, Nearly nobody talks about outside of Germany. So perhaps we can bring it a little bit to the light. Uh, one last question for today. We have got
Sure.
big protests in Ukraine. I don't think they coming from the people, or is
No.
it just show from, let's say, some open society or something
Yeah.
like this to put Zelensky out? And I think Zelensky will not survive this in the end. What is your
Yeah.
opinion on this?
Okay. So, first of all, I agree with you that these protests actually aren't that big. First,
Mhm,
so I've seen numbers of up to 40,000 in Kiev and much smaller elsewhere.
mhm,
This is what you could call the professional protest class.
mhm,
These are people who are employed by Western NGOs, of which there are a lot of in Ukraine, and a number of students that they have gotten to come out with them. All of them under the age of 25, at least when it comes to men, because any man who would show his face on the streets who is older than 25 and protest would immediately be conscripted and set off to the front, right? That Ukrainian men are afraid to leave their homes if they're over 25. Um, but I do not see any of the why they this I do not believe that this is spontaneous, that the people are so concerned about the ultimate makeup of the commission that determines the director of Naboo and Sapo, whether that's Europeans who choose it, as has been done, or whether it is, their own president. I don't believe that actually drives thousands of people onto the streets, even thousands to protest, considering what has happened. When there hasn't been any significant protests, because of the political repression in Ukraine for the last, not only for the last 3 years, but actually significantly longer than that. But I don't see any of the other telltale signs of a trademark color revolution. Okay. There is no political opposition that is backing this, right? Now, there is no legitimate political opposition in Ukraine, right? Because all of the real opposition has been lustrated and banned and pogromed, right? All the left parties in the country, all of the parties representing East Ukraine, right? They've all been banned. They don't, they're not allowed to exist anymore. But there still are factions, political factions within the Maidan. And the other two, if you want to talk about the former oligarch leader of the Kiev regime, Petro Poroshenko's European Solidarity Party, or Yulia Tymoshenko's Fatherland Party, they're not maneuvering themselves, right, as potential replacements, or Klitschko, right, the mayor of Kiev. None of them are doing that. Even Zaluzhny is not doing that in the UK. In fact, Timoshenko and Poroshenko both vocally back what Zelensky has done to seize back the governorship, the control of these anti-corruption watchdogs from the Europeans, right? They back that. So, second of all, there's no sign of any oligarch support for this, which was absolutely essential for the Maidan. Third, there's no sign that the Banderites, the ultra nationalists, are behind this at all. There's also no sign of any defection of the police, the security services, the military. If there wasn't any of that, I mean, at the very least, they would have to stand down because that's what happened in
Yep.
2014. If they would at least stand down, if there was significant muscle, like as there was with the far right battalions in 2014, then the security services standing down could result in the same thing. None of this is happening. I don't even see any Western leaders backing the protests to that extent. I mean, von der Leyen and Starmer have expressed some concern. Those it's not the same thing. So I do not regard this as a regime change attempt against Zelensky. I actually think he's quite secure in his power base. They just reshuffled power this week. Zelensky and Yermak consolidating power. Ultimately, that's what this Naboo and Sapo reconfiguration is about as well. So I don't see any real threat to Zelensky. Or at the end of the day, Zelensky survives because the U.S. has no better alternative for him. If the U.S. decides to get rid of him, as Seymour Hersh suggested in the rhetoric, but I do not believe that he is being fed accurate information. I believe he's wrong, as he's been unfortunately wrong on several things with regards to the information he has been fed over Ukraine by his U.S. intelligence services. I just don't see any signs of it. I mean, things could happen, right? New data points could emerge that would convince me otherwise. But as it's staying now, this is not a color revolution. This is something, right? But it is not an attempt to change out Zelensky. There were better times to do that in the past. There might be other times in the future to do it, but not now. I don't see it now. I see him continuing for the near future. This might be a warning shot,
Mhm.
right? This might be, this is the kind of thing we could do, but this is not the full court press that would be required to actually change him out. This might be an attempt to pressure him, which is a very different thing, to get him more firmly under control. I don't think it's necessarily even going to work. And so again, I'm not completely sure what this is. I know it's not spontaneous, but I don't see it as a regime change effort at the moment either. I don't see enough of the other telltale signs. So right now, unfortunately, it means, here's the thing. If you were, for instance, to change out Zelensky with Zaluzhny, right, which is the
Yeah.
most likely other scenario, that's not an improvement. Zaluzhny is a committed Banderite fascist in his own regard. In his military office when he was commanding the military, I mean, they took pictures there. If you look at those pictures, you see two busts of Stepan Bandera because one's not enough. You have to have two, I guess. And one of Roman Shukovich and the big red and black banner, right, dominating the room on the back. That Zelensky has internalized the Banderism that is the vanguard and undergirding of the Kiev regime. He wasn't a Banderite fascist any more than Petro Poroshenko was when he was the oligarch. He was a political insider. But they both internalized it because they came to understand that is the basis of the regime, of the power of the regime that they inherited. Zaluzhny, on the other hand, he's already a committed Banderite. So I don't think it would be any better if we replaced, it might even potentially be worse. The Russian has never attempted to kill Zelensky, like evidently the Kiev regime has attempted to assassinate Putin, because they regard him as a liability. for the Kiev regime. For he continually makes diplomatic mistakes. He makes military mistakes, dictating political stratagems over military stratagems. So that's where it is right now. I'm not so sure that anyone that could conceivably take power out of the existing regime in Ukraine right now is capable of doing that right now, and two, would be better than Zelensky. I think that he will more than likely hang on until the bitter end of this regime and perhaps beyond it. Right? I At some point I think it entirely possible that he'll be leading a government in exile in Poland or the UK or even in Brooklyn. I mean, he could probably take up an apartment together with Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and Juan Guaido, and they could pretend that they're leaders of U.S. backed countries together. You know,
Yeah,
maybe you could have a reality show. You could vote them out of the house or something like that. I don't know,
yeah.
but that's what I see as Zelensky's future. Unfortunately, I think this regime is going to die with him at the helm.
Uh, yes, I also think that he has no chance to get out alive of this. The only chance I think he would have is to go to Moscow, let's say in dark clothes, and beg for his life and say, "I have to tell many things what was done in Ukraine." Perhaps he will come to sin, and the otherwise, I think he would be an asset, would, let's say, be, or has to be removed. So he can't take any secrets out of his knowing to, let's say, when it's over. Perhaps we will see.
That's a good point. That's a
Yeah.
good point.
The last thing, could it be that one point on and at one point the Ukraine will change side when it's so hard for them? You don't think so? Okay.
No, not with this regime. I
Okay.
mean, there is a the majority of Ukrainians at some point in the future under a Russian installed government could come to regret. I mean, obviously, not all of Ukraine. And we'll have to see what, if any, of Ukraine is left being called Ukraine when this conflict is over. And I don't see it ending anytime soon. I got to be honest about
Yeah.
that. And this is going to continue on for at least another year, perhaps another few years. And Russia is just going to be forced to go further and further and further, I think, until they reach the Polish border.
Yeah.
Not because they want to, but because they won't have any other good option. It's not a good thing. It is a bad thing. There are no good endings for anyone to this conflict. No, none. Not for Russia, not for Ukraine, not for Europe, not for Germany, not for the US, for no one. This is going to bad. There's only degrees of bad moving forward. That which is an unfortunate reality. But the idea that the current regime could flip sides and turn against Europe. No, that's I know that there is a meme, almost a meme of that in certain Telegram channels on the Russian side, of which I'm a part,
Yeah.
but I don't see that as realistic. I don't see that as realistic, and I like to think I know the mentality in Ukraine fairly well. My wife is from Crimea, and we have family in the Donbass and Kharkov and Odessa, distant family, but family. So I think I understand, having been in Ukraine enough, even the parts of Ukraine that were never really Ukraine.
Mhm.
But I think I have a better understanding than some other people in the alt media, simply because they don't understand Ukrainian mentality and this problem with bitterly contested conceptions of Ukrainian national identity. At the end of the day, I very much believe that the end result of this is that Ukraine is eggshell, like Humpty Dumpty, that was broken,
Yeah.
that was pushed off the wall or fell off the wall or threw itself off the wall, however, and that all the hegemon's horses, all the hegemon's men will never be able to put poor Ukraine back together again. Much like Syria, by the
Yeah.
way, which I think is going to face the same fate. So it's a pity. There was nothing wrong with the idea of an independent Ukraine until that was hijacked by Banderism and weaponized in pursuit of US geopolitical goals.
Yeah.
And then the very conception of a Ukrainian nation became poisonous. And I don't see a way back from that, unfortunately. It did not have to be that way.
Okay. Perhaps history is repeating itself
It
after.
is.
Yes, yes. And we will see what will happen. So, Mark, for this time, I say thank you very much. I hope everyone will follow you on Boosty or your other channels. It's a very good work you do, and I hope we will make a new show, let's say, in a few weeks, and we can discuss next very interesting things. So thank you very much. Follow Mark on Boosty and on his other Telegram channels. Give us a like, and yeah, until the next time, I say thank you very much.
Likewise, I enjoy our conversations. I wish your channel all the success as well. I'll certainly send my followers your way. And may I just say, because I don't believe that in our lifetimes that we can seriously hope for better Russian-German relations, I will think fondly of an alternate world where Russians and German governments, political elites could have better relations. But it's unfortunately not likely to be this one.
I also hope it. Perhaps we can do it on the private way, and when we as humans go together and visit each other, and we have got many Russians here in Germany, and they are good people, and perhaps we can tie it together on this level, and then I think we can create a better world in this thing.
Amen.
Okay, thank you very
Amen.
much. Until the next time, bye bye.